Okay, thank you everyone for hanging in there until the afternoon. It's been a great panel. We're here this morning. We've got some of the industry veterans here to discuss AI agents. And a very important question in that domain is, of course, who owns intelligence? And then everything that comes after that, AI agents, tokenization, and obviously the power of open source. My name is Leah. I'm the founding partner and chief strategy officer of BitGPT. We are a privacy-preserving agent network founded by the SingularityNet founding team. And so obviously this is a question I concern myself with every day, and I know you guys here all do too. So please, I'd like for you all to introduce yourselves, but more importantly, a question I asked myself today was, in order to know who owns intelligence, what do we actually even define as intelligence? I think especially when it comes to decentralized AI, at what point is a system intelligent? And so perhaps introduce yourselves and also let me know, what's the answer to that question for you?
Yeah, so I'm Jeremy. I'm a co-founder at Aizel Network. So a little bit about the projects. We're basically building the first decentralized AI infrastructure in the space that is dedicated to high-value AI. And this actually very relates to the question that you raised, because the very fundamental question is what's intelligence, right? How do we define that? Right now, if we look across the space, all the AI agents, all the AI applications you see, they're pretty much like doing useless stuff, right? They're doing social posting, auto posting, VTubers and stuff like that. And a common thing about those applications is that the value added by AI on those applications is very superficial. It's very limited. So nobody think this is the end game for intelligence, right? So I think the other side of AI application is really where the real potential is that AI is actually touching on more, let's say, foundational value, providing foundational value, productive value, and those markets, those scenarios that have higher, profit margins, right? Not only like those, low value markets. So actually, that's what we target. We try to transit AI from low value market to higher value market. And what we define intelligence is actually the intelligence that can act on themselves. So I think autonomy is a really important part that actually comes to the definition of intelligence, which is AI agents are able to make decisions on their own. They can be fully transparent. People can actually know what's going on inside that AI agents, and people can actually, for example, securely deposit their money to the AI agents, and they can trust them, right? So trust is one of them, and also privacy should not be compromised by intelligence, and also intelligence should be able to make a decision by themselves. So that's actually our definition for intelligence. And the second question is definitely who own it, right? So I think when we have that clear, let's say, 3 pillars of definition of intelligence, who owns it becomes a very clear, answer. Have a very clear answer for that. So,
yeah. Hi, Kai, founder from Impossible Cloud. So thanks for having me. Brief background: I'm a serial entrepreneur. I founded a gaming company before, pretty large, more than $1 billion combined revenue. Did a reverse IPO to the Nasdaq, and now at Impossible Cloud, we are starting to build a decentralized cloud, trying to bring mass adoption to Web3. Real-world revenue over to Web3 spaces. Intelligence, maybe also as an addition to the background, usually I don't use that much, but I have a doctor's degree in law, and I think a lot of the questions are technically related, but also have a big relationship to legal questions. In terms of intelligence, ownership, and so forth. So I think there is a gradual way. There is no one single inflection point until we say, okay, finally now AI agents have their own intelligence. I agree, it has a lot to do with autonomy. On the other hand, what we will need in terms of ownership, once agents are so autonomous that we will call them intelligent, they will also have a legal property. Right, so right now you have legal properties to individual people, you have legal properties to entities. That's the 2 aspects that we know in law. And then in the future, there will be a 3rd category for autonomous, intelligent agents and so forth, where they also can have ownership, liability, all these kind of things. And I think once we'll get there, in terms of intelligence, if they are autonomous enough, innovative enough to create certain things on their own, not only at the behalf or at the intention of individuals, then I think we'll reach the threshold where we call this intelligence.
Thanks. Hey, Evan from CoinFund, one of the partners at the firm, work across our various investment strategies. As quick background, I come from traditional finance before crypto, but I think most important, actually, one of the pivotal moments of my life was reading The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil when I was in high school, and to see some of those accelerating trends start playing out now, where we are today has been really awesome to see. And I think I personally think we're kind of in the faster rather than slower takeoff scenario. But to answer your question, I think I define intelligence as really more from a microeconomic lens. So really pretty broadly, meaning intelligence for me really is just the ability for algorithms or systems, however you define them, to solve economically valuable problems. And that most of the time now has tended to be more software systems as we think about LLMs today. But I think how I define intelligence actually is going to encompass some of the physical world soon too, with the advent of robotics that are connected to some of these software systems. I guess the other point that I view as important as we consider what intelligence is the inputs and how that maps from maybe a mapping perspective relative to the economic value that's created. So as we think about compute, as we think about inference, data, and maybe the role that privacy preservation has, the role that verifiability has, I think that all ultimately kind of I think they're all kind of synonyms of each other, and that mapping exercise is what I think is quite fascinating about some of these systems that are being built by my co-panelists today, by Valory, for example.
Yeah, excellent answers so far, and I really like the last point as well, because I'm economist by training. So hi, I'm David, basically co-founder of Olas, and Valory is core labs behind Olas. We're building autonomous AI agents, and in the past I did a lot of game theory, and I also would say I look at this as a question of from an economics lens and a game theory lens, and if you think about if at a very macro level, in an economy, what are the two inputs? It's labor and capital, and so if you're having these artificial systems which you can create, AI agents that have agency, that have a goal, and that can work towards that goal, then it becomes obviously interesting from a use case point of view what we can do with this, but it also becomes interesting from an economics perspective, where does value accrual happen really at a grand scheme, not which token trades well or something, but really on the economic macro level. And I think there's big questions there, and we don't have all the answers, but where I naturally gravitate towards is that one thing which we in crypto kind of all, I think, subscribe to some degree is if it's not your keys, it's not your coins. And if we apply this to intelligence, then there's also a piece there where if we don't have control over the models that make up the agents and whatever else makes up the intelligence of the agent, then we don't really control that kind of value generator. And I think of them as sort of systems that generate value for us. So yeah, not sure that fully answered your question, but it gave some additional color to it.
Okay, so to recap, that's not very intelligent. Okay, so to recap, if we were to say there's a formula almost of intelligence of what I heard today, it's having autonomy, legal properties, economic value that also accrues over time in a kind of more meta sense, and the ownership of the model as well, and access to the model. Personally, what I would have added to that is what I find is interesting is all very qualitatively based. I myself define intelligence as also having quantitatively based. I define it as having qualitative context awareness as well. And so I think that's something that actually segues into the question of data ownership. We can dive into that a little bit more in a sort of popcorn style. But each of you create and facilitate an AI agent framework in different ways, whether it's you're investing into it, you provide kind of storage hosting frameworks, etc. How much of that intelligence is distributed, and what is your own contribution to making that intelligence better over time?
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to the initial question, who actually own, or where's this kind of ownership of this artificial intelligence at the moment? Well, it's largely with centralized labs who provide fantastic models, right? And so I guess where we want to get to on a decentralized AI space is to a situation where users and groups of users, DAOs, whatever, can take more ownership of those systems, and that has all sorts of layers, to that answer. Obviously, if you look at what Olas does, so Olas gives end users basically software that they can download that makes up an autonomous AI agent, and that agent then does valuable things for them. So we have use cases from DeFi to kind of these social character agents to prediction markets, and these agents are basically systems. So there isn't like, like a single like sort of executable that you can download and then that makes up the whole agent. They're multi-agent systems, so they rely on other systems, and some things happen locally and some things happen elsewhere. So the agents, have their assets on various blockchains. They might interact with centralized APIs to get some of their context and to contribute, let's say, to a social media platform. They obviously need access to models, and so then the question is like, where are these models? Olas isn't opinionated about that. So some use cases the models are local. Sometimes there's just like centralized models. Then you can use decentralized inference networks. It's a bit mix and match based on the use case, and I think that's also what I believe in. There's some use cases that make a lot of sense to have like a fully verified decentralized setup. So imagine like a DAO, like on-chain, like signaling that they want to manage some funds in a certain way, and then sort of handing this off to this more complex off-chain system. Like you wouldn't want that to run on someone's server. You want to have like ironclad guarantees around how this is executed. On the other end of the spectrum, a lot of Olas agents run locally on users' devices. So here, like, it's much more about the integrity of the software because you're literally owning it, rather than like additionally verifying, let's say, the compute of like whatever the model is doing.
Sorry, just to play devil's advocate there, in all those features and functionalities that you provide to the end user, it sounds a bit like your end user has to be very intelligent in and of themselves. So how much is the intelligence of a solution also defined by the literacy degree of the end user?
Great question. I also don't want to, take over the panel. So we do have solutions for both, but yeah, it depends on, like,
Great.
we have a end user.
Anyone else want to share on that?
That's a spicy question. I guess I would answer it by saying I think the average literacy requirement keeps going down to access the maximal value that can be created from interfacing with these systems, because on the one hand, while it's easy to get pessimistic about, Gen Z, brain rot, TikTok, I think at the same time, if you ever spend time with any young people, young children, the neuroplasticity is very high, and I think they'll ultimately adapt to interface with the tools, especially as the tools themselves benefit from becoming easier to use over time. I think there's a related dynamic here where, at the end of the day, I think one of our core beliefs at CoinFund is that open systems that are auditable, that are modular, that are composable, that are really, at the end of the day, just more transparent, does allow better servicing of the long tail of use cases. The application of these intelligences ultimately we feel works better over Web3 Rails. You can see a lot of this happening with even the long tail of content on centralized systems like YouTube, for example, right, or Twitch, where even the top streamers, I think a stat I saw, they're only responsible for like maybe less than you would think of the total viewership hours. And I think we believe intelligent systems ultimately, when you free them up from centralization, as tends to happen with the race to the bottom on the marginal compute cost side, or even on the model training side with DeepSeek as an example, that frees up a lot of use case, and that the end state is probably where these different centralized systems progressively decentralize. And obviously there are a lot of decentralized systems too that we're talking about that my panelists have founded or are working on, that ultimately kind of, I think, accelerates the movement to this attractor state that tends to be more open because the technology by default has to be open.
So intelligence not just by performance of a model, but also by our ability to evaluate it and its intelligence over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I'm naive, but I think there is this like tendency towards openness by way of proximity to blockchain and the solutions that exist today.
Awesome. And Kai, to follow up on that, obviously we're talking about literacy being quintessential to having mass adoption of AI agents, specifically decentralized AI agents. You're obviously working on some scalability issues yourself. Where do you see the bottlenecks right now to actually creating that DAI agent economy that we all dream of, and how far away do you think it is?
Well, I mean, in terms of scalability, I think we are still at the very beginning. We have to meet at the same time what has been mentioned before, an open, composable, verifiable system, which essentially decreases performance. And if you want to have a scalable system, you need to really solve for both. And I think that's one of the key and major issues that we need to overcome. Especially like in global distributed systems, that's not an easy task. So I mean, as what we have done before, like building systems for hundreds of millions of people, as the scale goes up, things become more and more complex. And but I think we are getting there. The more infrastructure we're building and connecting into Web3 systems, I think the more the performance and all these issues will go away. But it's just a matter of time until we get there.
Okay, so if we kind of swallow that reality that we are pretty much behind centralized efforts, and it's on us to make it juicy for end users to prefer decentralized AI agents, I do wonder whether tokenization and obviously having a commercial market around ownership in and of itself, making ownership something tangible also, could be a way to achieve that, or at least buy us a bit more time. I'm sure all of you have thought about how the tokenomics works and how ownership plays into that. Who would like to share their thesis?
Yeah, maybe I can follow up with what the panelists just discussed on let's say, the distribution of intelligence. So I think there's clearly a very clear shift from centralized hosting AI to decentralized one. This is apparently like, I mean, maybe 2 years ago, maybe like 1 year ago, we never think that maybe training a model in decentralized way can actually have better economics of scale. But right now, I think it's coming to close to the point. And DeepSeek is definitely one of the examples. And also, there's some Web3 companies doing that pretty well. I mean, in the training side. And also, there's some inferencing, and also there's some fine-tuning side. There are also some pretty good companies. So I think this transition is very, very clear. And I think from our perspective, I think the other thing that we're trying to achieve is that if you want AI to really be distributed or function in a decentralized way with better economic scale, there's two things you have to realize. The first one is that the AI model is good enough, and it should be hosted decentralized. This is the first one. And the second thing is that you have to trust it. So I think from our perspective, we're trying to solve that when the AI is being run, how can you trust it? How can you, I mean, your privacy is not consumed, not compromised, and also the AI interaction in between is also verifiable and stuff like that. So I think decentralization is one part. It's about compute, it's about storage, but on the other hand, it's also about the essence of AI. Essence of AI is black box. Like AI is, if there's one technology in the world that is super black box, it's probably AI. And you have no idea what's going on inside when you use it. So let's say if AI is touching on your wallets, doing some, critical stuff, making decisions and stuff like that, you have to ensure that there's guardrails that ensure that AI is coming in the right direction. And come back to the question. So I think, because what we are working on is more on the autonomy, like autonomous AI side. And I think the autonomous AI actually create a really flywheel, not flywheel, but probably more decentralized and more, just Evan mentioned in the YouTube example, which is like a more, let's say long tail, economic experiment, or maybe like a model, which is traditionally speaking, if let's say, for example, like a DeFi, like a financial manager that is managing your money, he's going to take some middle cuts, right? And according to, let's say, the capital gain that he's doing for you. But let's say when the agent is doing that, you don't have to pay fee for him, because honestly, if the agents are able to actually make the money themselves, I mean, they're just good to go. I mean, the deployer will probably have to, they get the cut of the revenue, but that's it. Actually, the revenue or the value generated from the AI agent is 100% distributed to all the other contributors. For example, the model deployer, or the compute providers, like where the model is being computed, and also the users, right? So I think this model or the autonomous agent or autonomous AI trend actually gives us a really good, let's say, experiment opportunity that we can actually run a economic model in a truly trustless and autonomous way. Nobody can ever touch on that. Nobody can ever tamper that, and it just go. And I think this is a really something we're experimenting as well. So to be concrete, I think they're model providers, they're model like specifically model deployers, and also model runner, like the one providing. Let's say from our side, it's TEE, it's a hardware technology, and also, users and anybody who's engaged in this workflow. But the only one that is not taking the profits is the agent himself, but which, in traditionally speaking, is taking a lot of the profits for middlemen. So I think that's a really fun thing to be happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a quick add-on to the ownership piece. I think like we all saw in recent months like one interesting model of ownership, right, which is basically people create these AI agents and then really detached from it as some sort of coin, but there's this kind of, by law or whatever, connection between it and people trade in it. And then like one argument, I think for that model is that, speculation is good, it attracts like attention, it attracts growth, blah, blah, blah. But I would actually also say it's important to not lose sight how bad it can also be. I think we in crypto often get too carried away with the speculation. And the reality is, all of us use 10 times more like centralized AI products than decentralized ones. And if we want to be here in 5 years and really have changed the world, we really need to get our act together and build really valuable utility-based agents that actually make sense. And that means
you're totally right.
That means not getting too distracted with like the short-term rotation around like various AI agents. It means building actually useful products. And I think that's the big challenge for the space, because we've seen it before. We launch 100 chains, everyone has another chain, but no one needs them. And the same thing can happen here. We can spend 5 years, rotating from one AI agent to another. So I think the counterexample is a world where all of us have really powerful autonomous AI agents that they own, either in the sense where it's fully on-chain in this autonomous decentralized sense, or in a way where we can just have like local software bundles that are really powerful, that get stuff done, that live on our mobile devices. So we own like our brains the same way we own our coins. And I think we should all push towards that. That is the compelling space I see.
Yeah. Maybe to add to that, I'm very confident that we are getting there. So what I don't like really about the Web3 term as it kind of the perception of web being web, I think we are moving away from web. So I think in the future, the web as we use it today will be very thin. Just a few people using it, or humankind using it for like social interaction and so forth. Basically, what we are building now is like this whole era where everything is like run by agents, AI, and so forth. So all the communication running there. So this is going to be massive, going to be huge. And then in terms of tokenomics, by the way, I think this enables, it's kind of open source on steroids. I'm very much a strong believer of open source movement anyways, like for long time already, but I think what was always missing there is like this incentivization layer. And I think adding this together, this can be super great. And you mentioning like another blockchain, layer one, whatever, what is it worth for? I think so far we are still in a world where everybody here is basically being part of POCing, testing the blockchain and so forth for machines. I think in the end, we built a great system, verifiable, composable, and so forth, which is made for running agents and machines in that world. And I think with the tokenomics, all the participants also intent-based humankind interaction with machines and so forth will have its share through the tokenomics in that system.
Yeah, I fully agree, by the way, with both of your points. At BitGPT, we have done exactly that. We've reduced large language models. We distill them into small language models, allow for vector storage. We create task-specific fine-tuning for agents, ergo the ability to add guardrails. But then to your point, if you don't own your keys and you don't own your model, you don't own your sovereignty. And in that, obviously, we have the opportunity to show tokenization as a mechanism for fractionalized ownership. Fractionalized ownership in this instance also mirrors back the contributory nature, actually, that AI has. Even in a centralized network, we were contributing without any benefits to it. Now, this begs a question for me whilst I was listening to you speak, and all of us here as advocates of, to your point, this mission, truly, that we have to dedicate ourselves to. So I asked myself, what's the most intelligent way to go about then pioneering this form of intelligence? Because I find it difficult, and we've got an investor here, so I'm going to call you out, because whether you're investing capital or the people in the room are investing into an AI agent framework, a lot of people here, you might have a service, a layer 2, layer 1, you're going to be asking yourself, do I build my own? Do I use someone else's? What's the difference in the frameworks? It creates competition between us. Are we going to have an interoperability problem again at the AI agent layer, right? And so I kind of asked myself that question of what is the most intelligent way to invest time and collaborative resources for us to build different frameworks, which I think is good. As we humans, we need diversity, right? Not everyone can speak to everyone, understand each other from day one, but that's good. That brings in a difference of opinion. So then, okay, what is the most intelligent go-to-market and investment strategy?
This is a great question. It's a tough one. I have a half cop-out answer, which is I think, the efficient market hypothesis is something that we in crypto definitely get to use, because a lot of these tokens, these frameworks, even individual agents, for better or worse, have launched tokens themselves. A lot of those, I think we could argue, maybe premature relative to where product market fit exists. But the fact that they have tokens now means those are tools that I think we can use to get a better sense of adoption, get a better sense of the mix of fundamental traction, but also some virality from the marketing perspective, some of the more, I guess, community-driven metrics of success. So I think you can leverage some of the secondary market prices to an extent. I think at the same time, we as investors, because we have liquid as well as venture strategies, there's an element of you can follow the crowd up to a point, but then certainly be driven by your long-term convictions as well, which is certainly how we think about our Web3 AI investment portfolio on the venture side. So I guess I didn't fully answer your question, but the elements of my answer would be use consensus views as expressed by price action where you can, but at the same time, if there are strongly held ideals that you have about how a product should be designed or how an intelligence system should be applied to solve problems, don't be shy about maybe taking some risk there too, because at the end of the day, markets are only efficient through the action of people that participate, whether they're humans or agents. And I do think and hope agents interacting more with just broader economies as their loops, so to speak, or as their intent-driven constraints are relaxed, I actually think that opens the door up to faster cycle times of really iterating towards product market fit, whether those systems are human gated or perhaps more autonomous over time. I'm like, maybe I'm a little too like anarcho-capitalist, but I suspect some of you in the room are, but I think that is one of the maybe critical paths to busting ourselves out of the local maximum, really going towards a world of abundance.
Yeah, because frankly, it's a pet peeve of mine being asked by investors, like, what makes you different to another AI framework? And like, of course, we're all going to have a nicely prepared answer to that. But I do ask myself the question, at which point is the monopolization that's kind of needed to drive up a token value in someone's economic kind of ROI on something, how much does that negate this mission that we're on and the devotion to that too? And
Yeah, I think I can probably add up to Evan's point. I think this is very interesting because I'm not exactly sure like what that sentence originally is, but in like TradFi or maybe like in finance market, like there's a saying that similar to like the crowd is always behind, right? There's like you have to front run the market somehow. Like only a minority people can do that. So I think it's very clear that if you look into all the AI agents markets right now, they're all, I mean, the hype there is fading away apparently, and I think it's mostly because actually I talked to. I'm not going to say the names, but you definitely know all the projects out there. I've talked to all the founders, and what they're saying is basically the market is exhausted. The phase where AI agents, social AI agents, looking for novelty, has gone, or it's going to be gone. So I think all of them are looking for the next thing. Like, so what's the next thing? And I think this is a very, very important question to raise. And currently, we don't see. Probably they're you know trying, they're having efforts there, but I think once we get that, for example, the consensus like at the peak point, at the very hyped stage, I think it's very clear that the framework or in terms of like let's say the speculative perspective, the framework, it's there should be new things coming out to support that valuation, to support that hype, which means that the hype is probably going to fade away pretty soon. So I think that's like yeah.
Yeah, I mean, naturally, I have to answer here. Obviously, investing into the underlying infrastructure is the right thing to do. I mean, obviously, as we build it out, I mean, it's a massive investment part of the whole thing, right? So there was this very recent estimation of the Vision Fund founder who said, like, until 2035, we'll need at least 9 trillion investment into capital expenditures to build the super AI, right? So it's a lot of stuff that we need to build out for that. Besides that, obviously, it's a very hard question. Where do you have the value accrual? Is it in the agent? Is it in the model? Is it in the underlying infrastructure? And I think there will be a lot of things that you cannot invest into, right? So if you think about the composable layers of the internet itself, you're not able to invest into SSL or whatever, right? So I think there are certain parts that we are building out that will be just a commodity, will be there, necessary, but you will ultimately not be able to invest into it. I think one of the interesting questions will be when investors are able to invest into agents itself, like not meaning the teams behind it, but when are agents ultimately autonomous enough to really be creative on their own and build businesses on their own in a way that investors can invest into agents themselves. So this ties back to my original starting sentence where I said you have people, you have entities, and you have ultimately AI as being also legally having legally ownership and so forth, being investable into. I think that's an interesting part, but probably we are still quite a few years away from that.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is to substantiate the vision, we need to invest in infrastructure. At the same time, we have this dependency to a hype cycle, which frankly, I always think that because we add so much entropy and garbage every time in this industry to any hype cycle, we are left with very little value accrual. But we are, right? And so, again, and I get to say this because I'm a minority in this industry anyway, I ask myself all the time, are we intelligent enough as an industry to actually own intelligence and create systems that do that? I'm a big advocate of Conway's law. So Conway was a mathematician that said that any product or solution is a mirror to the people who build it. So question to you, are we intelligent enough? How could we be more intelligent? Obviously adding more women, but you know.
Great points. Totally, I think I agree one needs infrastructure, but ultimately, why do you have the infrastructure? It's to build applications that someone will want and use every day. And so often crypto starts with a lot of infrastructure and very few applications. And I mean, it's very obvious that AI agents is the place where it just makes sense to focus on the application, because that's also the fun part. So I hope we see much more serious attempts, and Olas is certainly doing this, and others are too. But we have a product in theory with crypto itself, right? Like where you can own your coins and you can own your keys for the coins and you can be sovereign. But in practice, I mean, let's be real, hardly anyone actually fully does that because it's a mess. It's not just the key management, the conceptual overhead of even thinking of engaging with a lot of these products is just very challenging. And AI agents are made for that. So we have one thing that actually has product market fit, which is sort of trading of coins and so on and so forth. And I think DeFi as a whole has some form of product market fit. So for me, it's the logical point of departure. It's like, okay, if you're building autonomous AI agents today, that social stuff is fun. You can, whack it together in one day, get a bit of tweets about it. But really, where I think one can have these breakout successes, where we can even draw in like the AI folks and others, is in DeFi, because you can really create experiences where the user can have an agent that they fully own, delegate that agent an exciting task, like in the way you can describe it, which is the catch point, right? Like my mom will describe it in her way, I describe it in my language, you describe it in your language, and my agent will be able to do it. a UI can't do that. Beautiful design front end can't do that, but an AI agent can do it. And so I'm very confident that we'll see a solution there.
So the ability to translate human intent into essentially on-chain intent.
Yes. Yes, sorry. Specifically goes beyond this concept of intents, the technical concept, more like I give my agent a goal and then I do something else. So the goal being
intention to intent.
manage my portfolio, it's a very coarse intent, and maybe I come back a month later and I'm happy.
Maybe my answer to your question is I think we have enough intelligence, but that's not a sufficient condition. I think we also need more humility and introspection and a little bit less greed, and it's very Pollyanna-ish to say that. So I guess as an investor, we definitely try to dampen our biases in these ways, but it needs to kind of be a bit more pervasive. But I think ultimately the direction of travel feels positive to me, meaning over time as different, like whether you're in Web 2 or Web 3, whether you're a builder or a consumer, I think we're already seeing the mix of, or the proliferation of usage of LLMs and then some of these maybe more specialized solutions. And so over time, I think by hook or crook, the average intelligence of the human user actually goes up. There's a force multiplier effect. I just hope alignment is preserved, and we don't have to get into that in the last 2 minutes. But I do think intelligence, as you're kind of positing in your question, it was a scarce resource. It's going to become less scarce. And I think if the problems are solvable, that's not going to be the constraint. It's probably some other things that we're talking about.
Yeah, I just try to follow. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring in the dimensions from also the Web 2 space, like in terms of investability. Early stage, you invest into like ideas and team and so forth. Later on, maybe in traction, then revenue, and then comes profit. I think we are. It really depends on the stage you're in, and I think we are very early stage here. But soon enough, I think there will be a lot of focus into things that generate revenue. Right, so and I think we are at the maturity stage where a lot of these things that will generate revenue, and I think this is probably a guiding principle also where to invest into.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying. I'm trying to follow up with David's point here. Maybe I want to take a step further. David mentioned that we got to build some useful agents, right? We got to make sure that agents is like transiting from like useless to useful. But why would we need on-chain agents to be useful, right? I like my thinking on this is because it has to be, because right now, like the AI agents that we see so far, the profit margin is very low. They're not helping people to make money. I mean, the value add is very like limited. So, and the most successful business in crypto is DeFi for sure. It's DEX, right? It's DeFi. So having AI to be able to touch onto those higher profit margin use cases is a must-have thing. Like this is logic, right? So I think, and especially I'm not against like the gambling nature of crypto. I think it's totally fine. I think it's the beauty of market, free market. But I think how can we actually let people to gamble, or maybe like to use something that is actually useful, which means that can have higher profit margin on that use cases. I think that's the reason why that we're trying to make it like useful, because we want those AI agents to touch on those use cases. For example, the portfolio management. For example, trading. For example, maybe like governance of all kinds. And on those kind of scenarios, the profit margin is higher, so that agent itself can actually build a healthier business model, and people can make more money essentially. And I think this is following the gambling nature of crypto, whether you like it or not. And I think this is the reason why that we need it to be useful, because right now, not useful means no profit margin or less profit margin, very little profit margin. Yes.
Okay, I think we're nearing the end. So to conclude, I'll add my own bias, but no, just kidding. I think what's really interesting, what I heard from your last point there, is that essentially we are trying to balance a friction between, or to really calculate and measure what the value is of a mission to onboard people onto sort of decentralized AI and creating an antidote to the loss of sovereignty and centralized sort of technocrats. Now, to your point, when you say there is no profit in that, I would argue that the profit is in my investment in my future children not having to use an AI agent where I don't know what they will be kind of informed by or biased towards. And so I think that's just to leave that thought with you here in the audience is really like you get to leverage your existing user base and really understand what is this value that you can the value story that you can tell. Maybe as an industry, we should also learn to calculate not just what profit can we make from an economic sense, but also what value loss in a more sort of societal way can we help mitigate. And I think that was the precipice of a lot of the cultural movement of this industry that we seem to lose at times, and it's difficult because we have conflicting interests. But yeah, I'd like to leave that thought with everyone here. I think we have an amazing opportunity to build an alternative, a plan B, and we invite you all to do so with us. Thank you.